Chapter 1. A Young Boy with Big Dreams. Antony Blinken was born on April 16, 1962, in New York City. He grew up in a world of tall buildings, noisy streets, and endless possibilities. His parents, Donald and Judith, loved him deeply. They wanted the best for their son. Antony was a curious child. He loved to read books and listen to music. Sometimes he sat by the window, watching the city below. He wondered about the people in faraway countries. What were their lives like? What made their stories different and the same? These questions stayed with him as he grew older. His parents taught him important lessons. Be kind to others, they said. Work hard for what you believe in. Antony listened. He wanted to make them proud. Then, something happened that changed Antony's life. His parents divorced when he was a young boy. It was a sad time, but it brought new beginnings. His mother remarried Samuel Pizarre, a man with an extraordinary story. Samuel was a Holocaust survivor. He had lived through one of history's darkest times. His courage and wisdom would inspire Antony for the rest of his life. Not long after, Antony's mother and stepfather made a big decision. The family would move to Paris, France. Antony was only 9 years old. He felt excited, but also nervous. He didn't know what to expect. Would Paris feel like home? When Antony arrived, he saw a city full of beauty and history. The Eiffel Tower sparkled at night. The streets were alive with music, art, and people speaking French. Antony didn't know the language yet, but he wanted to learn. He listened carefully to the words around him. Slowly, he began to speak, too. Life in Paris was different. School was challenging. Antony had to work hard to keep up with his classmates. Sometimes he felt out of place, but he didn't give up. He studied, asked questions, and made friends. His teachers noticed his effort. They saw a boy who wanted to succeed. Antony's stepfather, Samuel, played a big role in his life. Samuel often told stories about his past. He spoke about the war, the concentration camps, and the bravery of people who fought for freedom. Antony listened closely. These stories were sad, but they also gave him hope. They taught him about resilience and the importance of standing up for what is right. Paris also opened Antony's eyes to the world. He saw people from many different countries living side by side. He learned that understanding others was the key to solving problems. This idea fascinated him. He wanted to be someone who could build bridges between cultures. Music became an important part of Antony's life in Paris. He loved playing the guitar. Sometimes he played for his family and friends. Music helped him express his feelings. It made him happy and gave him confidence. As Antony grew older, he began to dream about his future. He wanted to do something meaningful. He didn't know exactly what it would be, but he felt a strong pull toward helping others. The years in Paris passed quickly. Antony grew from a boy into a young man. His experiences shaped him in many ways. He had learned a new language, adapted to a new culture, and developed a love for learning. He had also gained a deeper understanding of the world's challenges and its possibilities. Looking back, Antony realized how much Paris had given him. It wasn't just a city. It was a place where he discovered his dreams. Little did he know, these early years would prepare him for a future he could not yet imagine. One day, Antony Blinken would use everything he had learned in Paris to make a difference on the world stage. But for now, he was still just a young boy with big dreams, standing on the edge of something great. Chapter 2. Learning from the World. Paris was a city full of life. The streets were busy, the cafes were full, and people from all over the world lived side by side. For Antony Blinken, this was an exciting new world. Every day he heard different languages and saw people from different cultures. It was like stepping into a storybook. But this story was real. At first, life in Paris was not easy. Everything felt different from New York. The language, the food, the way people greeted each other, it was all new. Antony had to learn quickly. He listened carefully and tried his best to speak French. Sometimes he made mistakes. People laughed kindly, and he laughed too. He knew that learning something new took time. School in Paris was a challenge. The lessons were tough, and the expectations were high. Antony studied hard. He wanted to understand history, politics, and the world around him. He asked questions and listened to his teachers. Slowly, he began to feel more confident. One person who taught him a lot was his stepfather, Samuel Pizarre. Samuel had survived one of the darkest times in history, the Holocaust. He had lost his family during World War II. He had seen terrible things. But Samuel was strong. He believed in hope, in learning, and in never giving up. In the evenings, Antony sat with him and listened to his stories. Samuel spoke about the war, the concentration camps, and the people who helped him survive. His voice was calm, but filled with emotion. Antony imagined the cold, the hunger, and the fear his stepfather had felt. He could not understand how someone could survive such pain and still believe in peace. Samuel's stories left a deep mark on Antony. They made him think about the world in a different way. He realized how important it was to fight for justice and human rights. He saw how people could suffer when leaders made the wrong choices. He wondered, could he help stop such things from happening again? Antony's home in Paris became a place of ideas. His family often talked about world events at the dinner table. They discussed politics, diplomacy, and how countries worked together. Antony listened and learned. He understood that every country had its own story, its own struggles. Outside of school, Antony made friends from many backgrounds. They came from different countries, spoke different languages, and had different traditions. Some friends had moved to Paris to escape war. Others were there for a better life. Their stories inspired him. One day, Antony met a friend from the Middle East. The boy's family had left their country because of war. "We had to leave everything behind," the boy said quietly. Antony listened and felt a deep sadness. It was another lesson. Wars did not just happen in history books. They were real, and they hurt real people. Paris also introduced Antony to art, music, and culture. He loved walking through museums, looking at paintings, and imagining the stories behind them. He played music, too. His guitar became a way for him to express himself. Sometimes he played in the park and watched people smile as they listened. Music, he realized, could bring people together, just like diplomacy. As Antony grew older, he started thinking about the future. He knew he wanted to make a difference, but how? Should he become a writer, a lawyer, a diplomat? The world was so big, and there were so many possibilities. One evening, as he sat on the banks of the Seine River, he thought about his journey so far. He had learned so much in Paris. He had seen kindness and struggle, hope and hardship. He realized that no matter where people came from, they all wanted the same things: peace, respect, and a chance for a better life. Antony's time in Paris shaped him. It made him see the world not just as places on a map, but as a collection of people, dreams, and challenges. He knew his experiences in the city would stay with him forever. One day, he promised himself, he would use what he had learned to help others. His journey was just beginning. Chapter 3. Back to America. A new beginning. After many years in Paris, Antony Blinken returned to the United States. He was older now, ready for the next chapter of his life. It was not easy to leave Paris behind. The beautiful streets, the friends, the memories. But he knew it was time to move forward. His next stop? Harvard University. Harvard was one of the best universities in the world. Many famous leaders, writers, and thinkers had studied there. Antony felt excited, but also nervous. Could he keep up with the other students? Would he fit in after living so long in Europe? At first, everything felt different. The streets of Cambridge were not like Paris. The buildings were old but not as grand. The people spoke quickly, and American culture seemed fast-paced. But Antony was determined. He knew how to adapt, how to learn, and how to work hard. University life was challenging. Classes were tough, and professors expected a lot from their students. Antony spent long hours reading, writing, and thinking. Some nights, he stayed up late, studying for exams. He wanted to understand the world, its history, its politics, and its people. One subject fascinated him the most: international relations. Antony wanted to know how countries worked together, or against each other. Why did some nations become friends while others became enemies? How could leaders make peace instead of war? These questions kept him curious, pushing him to dig deeper. His classmates came from all over the world. Some had grown up in America, others in countries Antony had never visited. They shared ideas and debated world issues. It was exciting. Sometimes the discussions were intense. Not everyone agreed with him, and Antony had to defend his ideas. Outside of class, Harvard offered many opportunities. Antony joined clubs, attended lectures, and listened to guest speakers. He once heard a speech by a former U.S. diplomat. The man spoke about the power of diplomacy, how words, not weapons, could change the world. Antony listened carefully. He knew this was something he wanted to be part of. Despite his busy schedule, Antony never forgot his love for music. After long days of studying, he often picked up his guitar and played in his dorm room. Music helped him relax. It reminded him of Paris, his family, and his dreams. But Harvard was not just about studying. It was also about finding his place in the world. Antony met people who inspired him. He learned from their experiences and shared his own. Slowly, he began to feel at home in America again. During his time at Harvard, the world was changing. There were tensions between countries, new challenges, and difficult decisions to be made by leaders. Antony followed the news closely. He wanted to understand not just what was happening, but why. He asked himself, what can I do to help? One summer, Antony had the chance to work in Washington, D.C. It was his first real experience in politics. He walked through the halls of government, met important people, and saw how decisions were made. It was thrilling and a little intimidating. But Antony didn't let fear stop him. He worked hard, asked questions, and proved himself. He saw how diplomacy was not just about meetings and speeches. It was about listening, understanding, and finding solutions. By the time Antony graduated from Harvard, he was ready for more. He had learned a lot about politics, diplomacy, and himself. He knew that he wanted to make a difference in the world. As he packed his bags, ready for his next adventure, Antony felt a mix of emotions. He was proud of what he had achieved, but he also knew there was still so much to learn. Where would life take him next? One thing was certain. He was ready. Harvard had prepared him for the challenges ahead. And with hard work and determination, he believed he could face anything. This was just the beginning of Antony Blinken's journey to becoming one of America's most important diplomats. Chapter 4. The Road to Washington. After graduating from Harvard, Antony Blinken had many choices. He decided to study law. He wanted to understand how rules and policies shaped the world. Law school was challenging, but Antony worked hard. He studied late into the night, reading thick books and preparing for exams. He learned how laws could protect people, but also how they could create conflict. When he finished his studies, Antony became a lawyer. He worked in a law firm in New York City. The job was good. The office was busy. The cases were interesting. But deep inside, Antony felt something was missing. His heart was not in law. His true passion was government and international affairs. He often thought about the world outside his office window. Countries were facing problems, wars, poverty, and difficult decisions. Antony wanted to help. He wanted to do more than write legal documents. He wanted to be part of something bigger. Then, an opportunity came. A chance to work in Washington, D.C., the heart of American politics. Antony took the job without hesitation. He packed his bags and left for the capital. He was ready for a new adventure. Washington, D.C. was a busy and exciting place. The streets were filled with important people, politicians, diplomats, and reporters. In every building, decisions were being made that could change the world. Antony felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Could he succeed here? His first job in Washington was in the State Department. He worked behind the scenes, helping policymakers. His role was not glamorous, but it was important. He wrote reports, researched global issues, and attended meetings with senior officials. The world was changing fast. The Cold War had ended, but new challenges were beginning. Conflicts in the Middle East, economic struggles, and political tensions were everywhere. Antony had to stay informed. He had to think quickly and work carefully. Every detail mattered. Antony's hard work did not go unnoticed. His bosses saw his dedication and intelligence. He was calm under pressure, thoughtful in his advice, and always ready to listen. Soon, he was given more responsibilities. He started working on bigger projects and meeting influential people. One of the most exciting moments came when he was asked to help with foreign policy decisions. Sitting in a room with experienced diplomats and leaders, Antony listened closely. He realized how much he had to learn. These moments were thrilling, but also challenging. Late at night, Antony often walked past the White House. He looked up at the bright lights and thought about the great leaders who had worked there before. He wondered, would he ever have the chance to help shape U.S. foreign policy in a meaningful way? But not everything was easy. Politics was tough. There were disagreements, long hours, and difficult decisions. Antony sometimes felt frustrated. Could he really make a difference in such a complicated system? Despite the challenges, he did not give up. He remembered the lessons his stepfather taught him. Never stop trying, never stop believing. Antony stayed focused on his goals. He wanted to build bridges between countries and help create peace. His experience in Washington was teaching him valuable lessons. He learned how to communicate clearly, how to negotiate, and how to stay calm in difficult situations. These skills would be important in the years to come. As time passed, Antony's name became more well-known in political circles. He gained the trust of key leaders and continued to move forward. He was no longer just a young man with dreams. He was becoming a respected voice in government. Antony knew there was still a long road ahead, but for now, he had taken the first big step. He was in Washington, working on real problems and doing what he loved. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 5. A Rising Star in Foreign Policy. Antony Blinken was now in Washington, D.C. He had worked hard, listened carefully, and learned a lot. But the real challenges were just beginning. Every day, he sat in meetings with experienced diplomats. They talked about big problems, wars, trade deals, and human rights. Antony listened, took notes, and gave his opinion when asked. His ideas were thoughtful and clear. He spoke with confidence, but never tried to show off. People started to notice. His calm voice and careful thinking made him different. In a world full of loud arguments, Antony was steady. He knew that solving problems required patience. It was not just about talking. It was about listening, too. Soon, Antony was given more important tasks. He worked with leaders from other countries, discussing peace agreements and economic issues. Sometimes the meetings were difficult. Not everyone agreed. Leaders argued, tensions rose, and emotions ran high. But Antony stayed calm. He knew that finding solutions took time. One day, Antony was asked to help with a major crisis. A country was facing war, and people were suffering. The U.S. needed to decide what to do. Should they send help? Should they stay out? The pressure was high, and every choice had consequences. Antony worked late into the night, reading reports and discussing options. He understood that every decision could change lives. It was not easy. He felt the weight of responsibility. But he also knew this was why he had come to Washington, to make a difference. His bosses were impressed. They saw his dedication, his knowledge, and his ability to stay focused under pressure. Soon, Antony was invited to even bigger meetings. He sat at tables with senators, military leaders, and advisors to the president. Each meeting brought new challenges, new questions, and new opportunities. Then, something incredible happened. The president himself wanted to hear Antony's thoughts. It was a moment Antony would never forget. Sitting in the Oval Office, he felt nervous, but ready. The president listened carefully as Antony spoke. He explained complex issues in a simple way. He gave honest advice and thoughtful solutions. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the president nodded. "Good work," he said. Antony felt proud, but he knew there was still more to do. As his career grew, Antony traveled to other countries. He met with world leaders and saw the challenges they faced. In some places, people struggled with poverty and violence. In others, leaders wanted to build better relationships with the U.S. Antony knew that diplomacy was not just about power. It was about trust and understanding. But not everything was easy. Some leaders did not trust the U.S. They thought America was trying to control too much. Others wanted quick solutions. But Antony knew that real change took time. There were difficult conversations, moments of frustration, and setbacks. Despite the challenges, Antony stayed focused. He believed in working together, finding common ground, and helping people. His hard work was paying off. More and more, Antony's name was being mentioned in newspapers and on TV. Reporters called him a rising star in foreign policy. Some people praised his ideas, while others criticized him. That was part of the job. Through it all, Antony remained the same. He worked hard, listened carefully, and stayed committed to his mission. He never forgot the lessons he learned from his family: kindness, hard work, and standing up for what is right. One day, after a long meeting, Antony walked past the White House. He looked up at the bright lights and smiled. He had come a long way from his days as a curious boy in New York, and his journey was far from over. Big things were ahead, and Antony was ready for them. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on Woo English. Remember, this content is specially made for Woo English listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of Woo English's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. Inside the White House. Antony Blinken had worked hard for years. Now he was stepping into one of the most important places in the world, the White House. He was no longer just watching history. He was part of it. Every morning, he walked through the grand halls, past paintings of past presidents. The walls seemed to whisper stories of leaders who had faced difficult times before him. Antony felt proud, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. Every decision made in the White House could change the world. His job was not easy. He was now a senior advisor to the president on foreign policy. This meant helping to decide how the U.S. would deal with other countries. War, peace, trade, diplomacy. Each issue was complex. Each choice had consequences. Some days, the situation felt calm. Antony and his team worked on long-term plans, building better relationships with allies, promoting human rights, and strengthening international partnerships. But other days, everything changed in an instant. A crisis would arise, a sudden attack, a conflict in another part of the world. Leaders needed answers, fast. Antony had to stay calm under pressure. He sat in high-level meetings, listening carefully as military generals, intelligence officers, and other advisors spoke. The president would then turn to Antony. "What do you think?" he would ask. Antony spoke clearly, choosing his words carefully. He had to consider every angle. What would happen if the U.S. sent troops? What if they chose diplomacy instead? He knew that his advice could impact millions of lives. Some nights, Antony barely slept. He would read reports late into the night, trying to understand every detail. The news never stopped. There was always something happening. Somewhere. A new conflict. A new challenge. A new question that needed an answer. One of the most difficult moments came when a foreign country threatened war. The world was watching. Diplomacy or military action. It was a tough decision. Some advisors wanted a strong response. Others wanted caution. The room was tense. The president asked for Antony's opinion. Antony took a deep breath. He believed in peace. He believed that talking, listening, and finding common ground could prevent war. "Let's try diplomacy first," he said calmly. "We can still find a way forward." The president nodded. Antony felt relief, but also knew that the challenge was far from over. Working in the White House was more than just making decisions. Antony had to represent the U.S. to the world. He met with ambassadors, traveled to other countries, and built relationships with leaders from around the globe. He knew that trust was key. If countries trusted each other, they could work together. But not everyone agreed with him. Some leaders were suspicious of the U.S. They thought America had too much power. Others wanted to move quickly, while Antony believed in patience. It was a delicate balance. Despite the pressure, Antony remained focused. He remembered the lessons from his childhood: kindness, hard work, and standing up for what is right. He thought of his stepfather's stories about war and survival. He knew how important it was to fight for peace. Even on difficult days, Antony stayed positive. He believed that diplomacy could change the world. He believed that words could be more powerful than weapons, and he believed that every effort, no matter how small, was worth it. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Antony stood outside the White House. He looked at the American flag waving in the wind. He thought about how far he had come, from a young boy in New York to a trusted advisor to the president. Could he handle the pressure? Yes. He had to. The world was counting on him, and he was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 7. Leading in Tough Times. Antony Blinken's days were long, and the challenges were great. The world was facing many problems: wars, terrorism, and global crises. Every morning, new reports arrived on his desk. Some were urgent. Some were heartbreaking. One of the toughest challenges was the conflict in the Middle East. Violence was spreading, and innocent people were suffering. Antony had to make tough choices. Should the U.S. step in? Should they offer help? Every decision had risks. Every step had consequences. In meetings, Antony listened carefully. Generals, intelligence officers, and advisors spoke about military options. Others talked about diplomacy. Some believed in peace talks. Others thought force was the only answer. The room was full of tension. The president turned to Antony. "What should we do?" Antony took a deep breath. He knew that every word mattered. "We must try diplomacy first," he said. "We can find a way, but it won't be easy." Some people agreed. Others did not. The pressure was high. The clock was ticking. But Antony believed in his choice. He believed in peace. He believed that talking, even in difficult times, could bring hope. Not all moments were in meeting rooms. Antony traveled to countries facing war and crisis. He met leaders, soldiers, and everyday people. He looked into the eyes of families who had lost everything. He shook hands with children who had seen too much. One day, while visiting a refugee camp, a young boy approached him. "Will we ever go home?" the boy asked softly. Antony knelt down and looked at him. "We are trying," he said gently. "We won't give up." These moments stayed with Antony. They reminded him why his work was so important. He was not just dealing with policies and reports. He was dealing with real lives, real hopes, and real pain. Terrorism was another great challenge. Attacks were happening around the world. Innocent people were being hurt. Governments were worried. Could they stop the next attack? Could they keep their people safe? Antony had to find a balance. Security and freedom. Strength and diplomacy. It was not easy. Some wanted quick, strong action. Others wanted a careful approach. Every decision was difficult, and there were no simple answers. One late night, Antony sat in his office, reading another report. He felt tired. The weight of responsibility was heavy. He looked at a picture on his desk. His family, smiling. They gave him strength. He reminded himself why he had chosen this path. Even in tough times, Antony never lost hope. He believed that with patience and hard work, solutions could be found. He trusted his team, listened to different opinions, and stayed focused on what mattered most: peace, security, and human dignity. But not everyone agreed with him. Some criticized his approach. They said he was too soft, too slow. Others said he was too bold. Antony listened to their words, but he did not let doubt control him. He knew that leadership meant standing firm, even when others disagreed. Through it all, Antony kept moving forward. He knew that leadership was not about making easy choices. It was about making the right ones, even when they were hard. One evening, as he walked past the White House, he looked up at the American flag. It waved gently in the wind. He thought about all the leaders before him, the challenges they had faced, and the choices they had made. Now, it was his turn. Leading in tough times was not easy. But Antony was ready. He believed in the power of diplomacy. He believed in the strength of hope. And he believed that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way forward. The world was watching. The pressure was high. But Antony would not stop. The journey continued. Chapter 8. Becoming Secretary of State. In 2021, Antony Blinken achieved something extraordinary. He became the U.S. Secretary of State. It was one of the most important jobs in the country. He was now America's top diplomat. His mission? To represent the United States to the world. Antony stood in the grand halls of the State Department. He felt a deep sense of responsibility. The walls were lined with portraits of past secretaries, leaders who had faced great challenges before him. He was following in their footsteps. But times had changed. The world was facing new and complex problems. Could he bring countries together during troubled times? His first days were filled with excitement and pressure. The world was watching. Allies wanted support. Rivals tested America's strength. The pandemic had shaken economies. Conflicts were growing. Trust between nations was fragile. Antony had to act quickly but carefully. In his new role, he met leaders from around the globe. He sat across from presidents, prime ministers, and foreign ministers. Some were friends, others were not. Every conversation mattered. Every word had to be chosen wisely. One of his biggest challenges was rebuilding relationships. In recent years, trust in the U.S. had weakened. Some allies felt ignored. Others felt betrayed. Antony's goal was clear: restore America's image and strengthen old partnerships. He traveled to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. In each country, he listened. He shook hands, smiled, and spoke with honesty. He knew diplomacy was not just about agreements. It was about relationships. Countries needed to feel heard, valued, and respected. At home, the challenges were just as great. Some people believed America should focus only on itself. They questioned why the U.S. needed to get involved in global issues. Antony understood their concerns, but he believed in cooperation. "The world is connected," he said. "What happens in one place affects us all." There were tense moments, too. Some leaders disagreed with him. They pushed back, demanded more, or refused to compromise. Antony stayed calm. He knew diplomacy was not easy. It required patience, persistence, and sometimes tough choices. One of the most difficult situations came when a crisis broke out in a foreign country. Protests filled the streets. People were afraid. The government was struggling. The world looked to the U.S. for leadership. Antony had to decide. Should they get involved? Or should they stay back? He spent hours in meetings, reviewing reports and listening to experts. There were no simple answers. Every choice had risks. But Antony believed in action. He reached out to allies, formed a plan, and offered support. It was not perfect, but it was a step toward peace. Despite the pressures, Antony found moments of hope. He saw young leaders full of ideas and energy. He met diplomats who believed in cooperation and peace. These moments reminded him why he had chosen this path. But being Secretary of State was not just about meetings and speeches. It was about making real changes. It was about standing up for democracy, human rights, and freedom. Antony worked hard to support countries in need, fight climate change, and promote equal opportunities worldwide. Late at night, Antony often sat in his office, thinking about the road ahead. There was still so much to do. The challenges were far from over. But he reminded himself why he started this journey. He wanted to build a better world, one step at a time. Looking back, Antony knew this role was the biggest challenge of his life. But he also knew that he was ready. Years of experience had prepared him. His family's lessons, his time in Paris, and his work in Washington had all led to this moment. As he stood in front of the American flag, Antony made a silent promise to himself. He would do his best. He would work hard. And he would never stop believing in the power of diplomacy. His journey as Secretary of State had just begun. And the world was waiting. Chapter 9: Facing Global Crises. Antony Blinken had always known that his job would be difficult, but nothing could have prepared him for the challenges ahead. The world was in crisis. Wars were spreading. Climate change was causing disasters. A deadly pandemic had shaken every country. People were afraid. They needed leadership. They needed hope. Every day, new reports arrived on his desk. Some told stories of war, families fleeing their homes, cities in ruins, leaders unable to agree. Others described natural disasters, floods, wildfires, and rising temperatures. And then, there was the pandemic. Hospitals were full, economies were weak, and millions were struggling to survive. Antony had to act fast. He knew that time was precious. He called meetings with world leaders. He spoke with scientists, economists, and military officials. Every decision mattered. Every choice could save lives, or make things worse. In one meeting, Antony sat across from a group of leaders discussing a war in another country. Tensions were high. Some wanted to send troops. Others wanted peace talks. The room was silent as Antony spoke. "War destroys lives," he said softly. "We must find another way." His words were careful, but strong. He knew diplomacy was not easy, but it was worth trying. The pandemic was another great challenge. Countries were struggling to get vaccines. Some nations had plenty, while others had none. Antony believed that everyone deserved a fair chance. He worked day and night, calling leaders, negotiating deals, and ensuring vaccines reached those in need. At a press conference, he spoke directly to the world. "We are in this together," he said. "No country can face this alone." People listened. Some felt hope for the first time in months, but not everyone agreed with his approach. Some leaders wanted to focus only on their own countries. Others did not trust the U.S. Antony understood their fears. He listened carefully, answered questions, and worked to build trust. Slowly, step by step, progress was made. Climate change was another crisis that could not wait. Antony traveled to international conferences, urging leaders to take action. He stood in front of large audiences, speaking with passion. "Our planet is in danger," he said. "We must act now." His words were serious. The stakes were high. But would leaders listen? There were moments of success and moments of disappointment. Some countries made promises, while others refused to change. It was frustrating. But Antony did not give up. He believed in progress, even if it was slow. One day, he visited a small island nation threatened by rising sea levels. He met people who feared losing their homes forever. A woman looked into his eyes and asked, "Will you help us?" Antony nodded. "We will do everything we can." Those words were not just a promise. They were a mission. Despite the challenges, Antony remained hopeful. He believed in the power of diplomacy. He believed that by working together, the world could overcome even the greatest crises. He reminded himself every day that change took time. At night, when the city was quiet, Antony often sat in his office, thinking. He thought about the refugees he had met, the scientists fighting climate change, and the families affected by the pandemic. Their stories gave him strength. His journey was not easy, but he knew that leadership was not about doing what was easy. It was about doing what was right. As he walked through the halls of the State Department, Antony knew that the world was watching. There was still so much to do. Wars to stop, lives to save, solutions to find. And Antony was ready. The crises were far from over, but neither was his fight for a better world. Chapter 10. The Afghanistan Challenge. In 2021, Antony Blinken faced one of the hardest challenges of his career, the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. After 20 years of war, it was time to leave. But leaving was not easy. It was emotional, it was complex, and it was dangerous. For years, the U.S. had fought in Afghanistan. Thousands of soldiers had been sent there. Many had not returned. The war had cost lives, money, and hope. Now, Antony had to help end it. The decision to withdraw was not his alone. The president, military leaders, and advisors all played a part. But Antony had a special role. He had to explain the decision to the world. He had to work with allies. And he had to make sure that leaving did not lead to more chaos. At first, things seemed under control. Plans were made. Troops began to leave. But soon, problems appeared. The Afghan government was weaker than expected. The Taliban, a group that had fought against the U.S. for years, moved quickly. They took over cities. People panicked. Antony watched the news closely. Images of Afghans rushing to airports filled the screens. Mothers holding their children, desperate to escape. Soldiers trying to keep order. The world was watching, and they had questions. Some asked, "Why now?" Others said, "What will happen to the people left behind?" Antony had to find answers. He spoke at press conferences. He gave interviews. His voice was calm, but inside he felt the weight of the situation. Criticism came from everywhere. Some believed the U.S. was leaving too soon. Others thought they should have left earlier. Antony listened carefully. He understood their concerns, but he also knew that no decision would be perfect. In Washington, meetings lasted late into the night. Plans had to change. More planes were sent to evacuate people. Diplomats worked day and night, helping those in danger. Antony called allies, asking for help. Some agreed. Others hesitated. Every hour mattered. One of the hardest moments came when a deadly attack happened outside the airport. Many people lost their lives, including U.S. soldiers and Afghan civilians. Antony felt deep sadness. He knew the risks, but seeing the loss was painful. Despite the challenges, Antony stayed focused. He reminded his team that their mission was clear: get as many people out as possible. He spoke with families trying to escape. He met with veterans who had served in Afghanistan. Their stories touched him. One veteran asked him, "Was it worth it?" Antony paused. It was a difficult question. He thought of the progress made in Afghanistan. Schools built, lives changed, freedoms gained. "We did what we could," he said quietly. and we won't stop helping. As the last troops left Afghanistan, Antony felt a mix of relief and sadness. The mission was over, but the challenges remained. Thousands of Afghans were still hoping to leave. The future of the country was uncertain. The world had strong opinions. Antony knew the criticism would continue. Some said the U.S. had failed. Others praised the effort to bring people to safety. Through it all, Antony focused on what came next. He worked on plans to help refugees. He continued talking to world leaders, urging them to support Afghanistan's people. Despite the difficulties, Antony believed in moving forward. He knew that mistakes had been made, but he also believed in learning from them. He reminded his team, "Diplomacy is about facing hard moments and finding a way through." Looking back, Antony knew that the Afghanistan withdrawal would be remembered for years to come. Some would see it as a necessary step. Others would see it as a painful ending. But Antony had done his best. He had handled the pressure with honesty, determination, and a deep commitment to those in need. And though this chapter had ended, Antony's work was far from over. There were still people to help, lessons to learn, and challenges ahead. As he walked through the quiet halls of the State Department, Antony thought about the future. He knew that every decision in foreign policy came with risks. But he also knew that with patience, hard work, and compassion, progress was always possible. Chapter 11. Building Stronger Alliances. Antony Blinken believed in teamwork. He knew that no country could solve the world's problems alone. Peace, security, and progress required cooperation. Allies needed to stand together, listen to each other, and work toward common goals. Antony was ready to help make that happen. From the moment he became Secretary of State, he focused on building stronger alliances. He traveled to Europe and Asia, meeting leaders, diplomats, and military officials. Each trip was important. Every handshake, every conversation, every promise made a difference. In Europe, Antony worked to rebuild trust. Some allies felt that the U.S. had not listened enough in the past. They wanted to feel like true partners. Antony understood their concerns. He listened carefully, spoke honestly, and promised a new era of cooperation. "We are stronger together," he said. "We share the same values, the same hopes." One of Antony's biggest goals was to strengthen NATO, an alliance of countries that promised to protect each other. He met with NATO leaders and discussed important issues: defense, security, and new threats. Some countries were worried about rising tensions with Russia. Could NATO stay united? Could they prevent a crisis? Antony worked behind the scenes, encouraging dialogue and unity. He reminded everyone that alliances were not just about military power. They were about friendship and trust. In Asia, Antony faced different challenges. The rise of China was changing the balance of power. Some countries were concerned about China's influence. They wanted the U.S. to help them stay independent and strong. Antony met with leaders in Japan, South Korea, and other nations. He assured them that America would stand by its friends. At the same time, Antony knew that avoiding conflict was just as important as preparing for it. He believed in diplomacy first. He reached out to China, looking for ways to work together on global issues like climate change and trade. Competition does not have to mean conflict, he often said. There were difficult moments. Some countries wanted the U.S. to take a harder stance. Others wanted to avoid tensions. Antony had to balance these demands carefully. He believed that diplomacy required patience, strategy, and constant effort. One of the most emotional moments came when Antony visited Ukraine. The country was facing threats from Russia, and people were afraid of war. He stood with Ukrainian leaders and promised U.S. support. "Your fight for freedom is our fight too," he said. His words gave hope, but he knew that challenges lay ahead. Back in Washington, Antony held meetings with his team. They worked day and night to strengthen alliances. They signed agreements, shared intelligence, and planned future strategies. The goal was clear: keep peace, avoid conflict, and help allies stay strong. But not everyone agreed with Antony's approach. Some believed the U.S. was doing too much. Others thought it was not doing enough. Criticism came from all sides. Antony listened, but stayed focused. He knew that leadership meant making tough choices, even when people disagreed. Despite the challenges, there were moments of success. New trade deals were signed. Military exercises were conducted with allies. Promises were made and kept. Antony saw progress, step by step. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Antony looked at a map in his office. It showed the countries he had visited, the alliances he had helped strengthen, and the work still to be done. He smiled. There was hope. There was progress. And he knew that working together was the only way forward. Antony believed that alliances were not just about treaties and agreements. They were about people, leaders, soldiers, and citizens working for a better future. It was not always easy, but it was always worth it. His work was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, but Antony was ready. He believed in the power of diplomacy. He believed in the strength of partnerships. And most of all, he believed that together the world could achieve peace. The journey continued, and Antony would not stop working for a better tomorrow. Chapter 12. A Diplomat's Legacy. Antony Blinken's journey is far from over. Every day he continues to work for peace, cooperation, and understanding. His role as Secretary of State is not just a job, it is a mission to bring people together, solve problems, and create a better world. But what will his legacy be? How will people remember his work? These questions remain unanswered. The choices he makes today will shape the future for years to come. Throughout his career, Antony has faced many challenges. Wars, crises, and difficult negotiations have tested his strength. Some days were filled with hope. Others were filled with doubt. But through it all, he never gave up. He believed in the power of diplomacy, the idea that talking, listening, and working together could solve even the biggest problems. His story teaches us many lessons. One important lesson is that leadership is not about power. It is about service. Antony has always worked not for himself, but for others. He has spent his life trying to make the world safer and more peaceful. Another lesson we can learn from him is patience. Change does not happen overnight. Diplomacy takes time. It takes careful planning, thoughtful words, and strong relationships. Antony's success comes from his ability to stay calm, even in the most difficult moments. Antony's legacy is also about teamwork. He knows that no one can fix the world alone. He has always relied on others, leaders, diplomats, and everyday people. His work shows us that real progress happens when people come together and listen to each other. But Antony's journey has not been without criticism. Some people have questioned his decisions. They have asked if he was too slow, too cautious, or too hopeful. In the world of politics, there are always different opinions. Antony understands this. He knows that leadership means facing criticism and learning from it. Despite the challenges, Antony remains hopeful. He believes that the future can be better. He knows that peace is possible if people are willing to work for it. His speeches, his travels, and his meetings with world leaders all show his commitment to this goal. One of the most inspiring things about Antony is his personal story. From a young boy in New York to a student in Paris to the halls of the White House, his life is proof that dreams can come true with hard work and dedication. Many young people look up to him. They see his journey and feel inspired to follow in his footsteps. They see that diplomacy is not just about politics, but about making a real difference in the lives of others. As Antony continues his work, he knows that the challenges will not stop. New problems will arise. Conflicts, disasters, and unexpected events. But he is ready. His experience, his passion, and his belief in cooperation will guide him forward. What can we learn from his story? We can learn that diplomacy is not about winning or losing. It is about finding solutions that help everyone. We can learn that listening is just as important as speaking. And we can learn that even one person with the right ideas and the right attitude can help change the world. As he stands in front of world leaders, as he speaks to the press, and as he works late into the night, Antony Blinken is building his legacy. A legacy of peace, a legacy of hope, a legacy of cooperation. His story is still being written, and the world is